I am going to have each of our panelists just give us a quick overview in understanding that we need to get things moving here. So Jasmine French. Jasmine is the Senior Manager of Ethics at Cummins. And Representative Robin Shackelford with the Indiana House District 98. John Thompson, President of Thompson Distribution. And Marshawn Wally, who is the President and CEO of Black Onyx Management. So obviously today's event, we're here to talk about equitable economies in Indiana. Today's event is all about building an equitable economy. And so what I want to hear from our panelists, if we could just briefly describe a little bit about the work that you are currently doing in your industry to create that foundation out of an equitable economy in Indiana. So I think we will go ahead and start off with Jasmine.
Sure. Yes, happy to be here. I work for Cummins, which is a global power generator and engine manufacturer. We're headquartered in Columbus, Indiana, and with our roots in the business community, Cummins has created a program called CARE, Cummins Advocating for Racial Equity. And through this program, we have 4 prongs where we're trying to drive change in areas of social justice, economic empowerment, criminal justice, and police reform. And through economic empowerment, Cummins has donated more than $3 million to Indianapolis, Minneapolis, and Nashville. And these donations are going to organizations with ties to Black business owners, as well as community financial development institutions. And so Cummins is really taking an active role in contributing direct dollars to those marginalized business communities.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing that, Jasmine. Representative Shackelford, we'll move on to you next. Can you hear us okay? So Representative Shackelford, can you talk just a little bit about what you are currently doing in your community to create more of a foundation for an equitable economy in Indiana?
Yes, thank you all, and thanks for allowing me to be here. As you know, I am the chair of the Indiana Black Legislative Caucus. So first, we have been doing our virtual town halls, just letting people know about some of that important legislation that passed or didn't pass. A lot of that includes the budget that we just passed this year and included a lot of funds coming down from the Biden-Harris administration. Those funds will be utilized for small businesses, in particular minority businesses. And we just want to make sure that everyone knows how to apply, get them assistance to apply. So I've been working with the Indiana CPA Society and also looking at working with attorneys, because what we have heard from some of our small businesses is that they don't have the capabilities to complete the application in order to get these funds. So we have invested millions into our small businesses, especially minority businesses, and just trying to build connections so we can have an equal playing field and give an opportunity for these businesses to apply for these grants that are out there.
That sounds like really valuable work, Representative. We appreciate you sharing and look forward to hearing more about that here in the near future. Mr. Thompson, same question goes for you. What are you currently doing to build an equitable foundation in the state of Indiana?
Well, there are a number of things being done. I'll try to be brief. Seems to be an echo here. First off, we formed what's called Business Equity for Indy, formed by the Indy Chamber and Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. I'm on both those boards, and I chair one of the committees. And though that organization is working to resolve many barriers to entry, to get more corporations to join first off, and when they do, to have a person that leads this effort, some designated person. You know, establish short and long-term goals that tie up to senior management, that are part of the overall corporate goals. Break down communication so that it is focused on minority businesses, not general communication. In addition to getting business, there are payment issues. Minority businesses are paid last. And that needs to be fixed. The smallest, most vulnerable companies are getting paid in 90 days. And I have many more comments to add, but I'll save those for later.
No, I'm really looking forward to hearing more. You've made some excellent points already. I think we'll go ahead and move on to Marshawn. Marshawn, same question goes for you. What are you doing right now to help build the foundation of an equitable economy in Indiana?
Certainly. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I am president and CEO of Black Onyx Management, which is a management consultancy focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm also a stratification economist, which gives us the opportunity to consult on a number of initiatives, including the Business Equity for India initiative that Mr. Thompson just raised. We also have our own programs, including Black Businesses Matter, which is a free program for Black businesses that focuses on storytelling. But probably the biggest initiative that we're working on right now deals directly with the problem of access to capital. And we're working on the development of a mission-focused community development financing institution to really get at some of the barriers that businesses of color, business owners of color face when engaging the traditional financial markets.
Oh, thank you, Marshawn. That's a really timely topic right now. And we're going to dig in just a little bit more to some of those issues that each one of you had brought some attention to. So what I'd really like to hear from you all right now, the issues that are being highlighted are issues that have always been there. But as we all know, the pandemic really did kind of shine a spotlight, if you will, on some of the equity issues that many folks have been struggling with for generations. I'd love to hear from you all what new programs or lessons learned have you seen that are actually producing results in moving the needle on a more equitable economy across the country. And so I think we'll go ahead and start off with you again, Jasmine. We'll just kind of keep in that order of things just to keep things moving. So go right ahead, Jasmine.
Really excited to share what Cummins has been doing in this space. We are supporting the American Express Coalition to back Black businesses. And that organization was set up to provide small business owners who had been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 with critical and much needed funding. And so Cummins has pledged $500,000 to the CBB Coalition to back Black businesses. And through that, we'll be assisting 60 small Black business owners, giving them $5,000 in grants, giving them mentorship and coaching at the executive level. And then through these resources, each business will be positioned to receive an additional $25,000 from Cummins in enhancement grants. So again, as a direct reflection of the COVID-19 pandemic, Cummins has really stepped up and is followed through with commitments we made beginning in October, and we've since been contributing those dollars to businesses.
What an excellent example of leadership and a corporation really leading through example and putting their money where their mouth is. Thank you for sharing that, Jasmine. That's great information. Representative Shackelford, I think we will move on to you next. Same question. Specifically, what things are you seeing across the United States right now, post-pandemic, that are producing results in moving the needle on a more equitable economy?
So I think we got a lot of funding that came down from the federal level. This was directly in response, one, to COVID, and then to also that movement for justice reform. So just trying to equal that playing field. So some of the money that we put into the budget for Indiana this year was the first time that we set up a $50 million to help with health initiatives, those health disparities. We know a lot of African American and minority communities are affected by mental health, tobacco. So nonprofits will be able to apply for these grants with the State Department of Health, and that is $50 million in that bucket. Another bucket that was created was $150 million specifically for minority kids who have been left behind because of the pandemic. These are grants that will be available through the Department of Education. So if you have a nonprofit that may have an after-school program, anything that deals with trying to lift those minority students and get them back on track, these are grants that you can apply for. One more thing I just want to talk about for small businesses. Under the CARES Act, the governor had already set aside about $5 million for small businesses to get them back on track and recover any loss that they have. With that program, he set aside about $500,000 specifically for minority businesses. So what we did during this past session is we codified it, which means we put it in legislation. We added money to it in the budget. So we created that small business initiative with $35 million. And these are those funds that small businesses can apply for. They are grants, and you can help recover from any loss that you had during COVID. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing that came down from national, that with advocacy from the community, we were able to get in a budget and start up these new programs.
Thank you so much for that. You know, it really is important that our audience members have the opportunity to kind of know what works and what doesn't and what right looks like. And I know for a lot of those folks who are in leadership positions or even elected positions, they don't always know where to start. But what I'm hearing from both you and Jasmine is that it's really about the intentionality. And so we'll see if John Thompson has some similar thoughts there. So Mr. Thompson, can you give me just a little bit of what you're seeing across the country that's actually producing results and moving the needle for a more equitable economy? I think you're muted, Mr. Thompson. Sorry. Maybe the red button at the bottom. Yeah.
Before I answer the question, let me make a comment. I own and operate several minority certified businesses. And I don't know if you all can see me writing, but I'm taking notes as the other speakers are responding because they're giving rich information. So hopefully the audience is capturing this because it's really good. There are a number of things that are taking place across the country and right here. First off, you look at corporate America, many of the largest corporations have made an effort to immediately increase their spend with minority businesses. particularly African American owned businesses. Not to diminish what's done for minority businesses, but over the past 20 years, African American owned businesses have fallen significantly behind in terms of minority spend. And the wealth gap for African Americans is significantly less than for white Americans, and it's the lowest of any group. So there's an effort to close that gap. So if you look at corporations like, I'll use Eli Lilly as an example, the CEO immediately committed to doubling, tripling the business, his spend with African American businesses over the next 3 years. And then if you look at the state, Robin Shackelford, Representative Shackelford made several comments, but I will add one, if you look at the Civil Rights Commission and the board that they've established at the state, they've been working very closely with the universities. And several of the universities, their spend has increased significantly as a result. So we're seeing results there and other state agencies. There's been several sources of capital, several pools of capital established to help minority-owned businesses, and in particular African-American-owned businesses of all sizes, down to those that are just starting up. There are several funds at the state, like Elevate Ventures, but a new fund was established here in town. Kelly Jones led it with Aloes, 68 Capital. And there are other funds being formed at the same time. There's an effort to reduce and really eliminate biases that affect minority-owned businesses, where corporate purchasing people have a perception of minority businesses when they walk in the door that's not really best for those businesses. And the last thing I'll say at this time, and I have more for later, corporate buyers and corporate leaders, they don't want to take significant risk. And so they like to buy from the companies they've been buying from. To buy from new companies is risky. And so we have to break down that barrier and say, hey, we will allow you to take that risk. Break it down and give these new companies a chance and these small businesses a chance. Thank you.
Well, I don't think that you could have set that up any better for our next panelist. Marshawn, I think you might have something to say on the funding piece, but if there's any other things that you're kind of seeing as a best practice for what's moving the needle across the country, feel free to throw that in there, but I think he teed that up just perfectly for you.
Sure, certainly. So what I like to do is start at the federal level and then quickly move down to local. So federally, we're seeing a tripling of the federal government's commitment to minority-owned businesses. You're also seeing a Buy America provision that is a carryover from the previous administration. That's going to continue to have positive implications for minority-owned businesses in general. In addition to that, coming down locally real quickly, one of the things that my company is involved with is a program called Black Businesses Matter, and a colleague of mine who's going to be who's also participating in the conference created this. We noted that right before the pandemic that there was an anticipation of losing up to 41% of Black businesses permanently across the country. And one of the things we've since learned in looking at both the Indiana disparity study as well as the Indianapolis disparity study is that the Black closure rate in Indiana is around 40%. What we're seeing is low receipts, lowest receipts, low business formation, and those two things are both challenges. And so what we do at Black Businesses Matter is try to tell the story of Black businesses. It's a podcast, it's a decal that allows folks to actually know that they're working with a Black-owned business. And really quickly, in our last 6-month report, when we're talking about metrics, one of the things Black business owners, the 117 businesses in our program said was that they felt like they didn't have access to information. Well, and participating in our program, 92% said that they did receive access to information and that it was useful. But the number that I think I really was looking at and was really proud of was that 67% of our businesses in the Black Business Matter program said they got new customers. And so they are continuing to, live, thrive, modify, change their business practices so that they can compete in our new normal.
Well, thank you, Marshawn. Unfortunately, those are some really, really staggering statistics, but it is, I guess, refreshing to know that there are some things that are being put in place to hopefully be a little bit more intentional about addressing some of those items. So I just want to talk briefly, a number of you have brought up policies and, whether they be at the government level or through businesses that can be aimed at creating more equity for, a large number of individuals whose voices are often not heard. But how can we be sure that the voices of the individuals that the policies are created for are actually heard? So, Jasmine, I don't know if you want to take a stab at that briefly, but specifically, how can we make sure that the voices of those individual programs who are intended for are actually heard?
Well, just speaking as an employee of a company that is really involved, I can avail myself of the resources within my employer. So at Cummins, our government relations team has been very active over the last year and a half, often participating in public comment sessions with the city council. So as an employee, I have to know who is on that government relations team, reach out to them, understand what positions they're advocating for, maybe share my personal experiences as a member of the community. I know our government relations team spent a lot of time advocating for House Bill 1006, addressing concerns of the community around policing. And so that's one way that employees can feel like their voices are being heard, by reaching out to really their colleagues. And, someone in marketing may say, gosh, I don't know anything about political advocacy, but I do know this colleague. Let me send them an email and understand what their job is and try to establish a relationship there.
Oh, thank you, Jasmine. That's excellent food for thought. Representative Shackelford, same question goes for you. How can we ensure that the policies that we're creating really take into account the voice of the individuals that those policies are intended for?
I'm sorry, you were going in and out, but I think I got the question. So basically, you're asking, how do we know that advocacy works? I would say when you look at those policies that people have been advocating for years, and finally they come true, like this year, House Bill 1006 was one of those advocacy produced pieces on law enforcement. So making sure that our law enforcement will be trained on de-escalation, making sure that they are penalized if they turn off their body cameras, that their record is going to follow them from department to department. If we did not have those people advocating over the summer, especially those young people, you wouldn't have seen this bipartisan support to make sure that we were going to now be able to effectively monitor and also hold our law enforcement accountable. In addition to that, we put in $70 million to upgrade our training facility for law enforcement. So I just want to make sure that that is another opportunity for minority businesses. If you are in construction or anything that deals with upgrading a facility, make sure you look at that bid and make sure you become part of that process, because we want to make sure that we're meeting our minority spend at the state level, and in particular, to those issues that you fought so hard for and to get that funding for. Another one is we are now creating or have created at the legislative level a legislative civility and equality task force. This would not have been created without the input from corporate America, from everyone advocating at the street level, because of how IBLC was treated when we were in session and trying to advocate on behalf of our constituents and got discriminated against. Everyone came down in support, advocated at all different levels. So now we have a bipartisan task force put together of legislators and our faith-based component of the session that will deal with how do we now make the legislative members more trained on diversity, on civility, and implicit bias, and also just how do we work better together. That would not have happened without the advocacy at both levels. And then lastly, as far as when it comes to community advocacy, I have been working on the grassroots on food deserts for a long time. We all know the east side of Indianapolis have been one of our biggest food deserts. This year, because of what Cook Medical Group invested in the east side community by wanting to open up a grocery store there, they put in the majority of the money. The state put in $600K to help with this grocery store project. But it's not just a grocery store. This grocery store will be owned by two young African-American men who were running their smaller stores, but Cook Medical is going to make them go through a training at Martin University so they will know how to run and operate this grocery store. And that was a partnership that would not have happened without the advocacy and the support of the community and the pushing. So I say, keep pushing. If you want to know if your advocacy is working, look at the policies that we are pushing.
No, amen to that. Is it possible that you are suggesting that, I don't know, that equity issues might actually be a bipartisan issue? It might be something that people can actually come together and work on together. That's amazing. There's hope for us all yet. So, all right, Mr. Thompson, how about you? When we look at making sure that the voice of the individuals that efforts and policies are supposed to be aimed at, how do we make sure that their voices are actually heard through those policies and programs?
There are a number of things going on and number of ways that take place. First off, I'll say that communities need resources, dollars, and other resources. They have a good sense of what the solutions are. They don't need people to come in and tell them how to fix problems in their communities. And the same with small businesses. They have a good sense. Now, some would say, well, John, you operate 4 minority certified businesses, all African-American owned. And so you should have a good sense. Well, I don't have a total sense because I've never had access to capital problems. I've always been able to get capital because of the kind of businesses that I buy and operate. Capital, I can go to a bank and borrow below prime and always could. But I talk to businesses that actually suffer the capital deficit, and I've loaned them money and watched how they use the dollars and the difficulty they have paying me back. And in many cases, it's not their fault. And so they've come up with ideas. So if you look at the Business Equity for Indy organization, for example, and Marshawn Wally, he's a consultant to us, so he's heavily involved. We invite small minority-owned businesses that are capital starved, Black-owned businesses, and have other deficits. We invite them to come in and present to us and really inform us as to what the problems are and what their needs are. But we listen very carefully. And so the state dollars that flowed into Black businesses during the pandemic. You know, Indiana Black Expo was involved with distributing those dollars. And so they got input from the Black businesses that they were distributing dollars to. And then others provided input and information also on what the problems were, what the needs are, you know, in terms of getting paid slow, as I mentioned earlier. And a really common problem is the large company gets a contract. They promise to give a portion to the much smaller business, but they don't. They get the contract using the minority business, and then they don't buy anything from the minority business. That's the kind of feedback that we've gotten, and other things like they're too small to be a tier 1 supplier. But if they break the contract down into a smaller bite-sized pieces, then I can service this piece here. And that's tier 2. So break it down and let the smaller minority-owned business participate at the tier 2 level. But you have to count those dollars in your program.
No, that's really good advice as a individual who's worked for the federal government and on all sorts of government. I've never actually heard anybody talk about the contracting piece in that way. That's excellent advice.
Yes, and there are many other pieces, Andrea, to that. I'll let Marshawn go on and let you direct the conversation. I'll come back with more.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, Marshawn, it sounds like he just teed up another one for you. So we'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, so there's a number of initiatives. And first, what I've really appreciated about the Business Equity for Indy initiative and the way John's ran the procurement program is that they did actually center Black business voices within the development of the initiatives that they're doing. The Indianapolis Urban League also has a business kind of questioning going on where they're working with experts within the field, within procurement, to really kind of talk about what are the challenges and what are the things that they can do with respect to, you know, breaking down scopes, as John suggested, or thinking about the kinds of products and things that they might need, or even how certification, like if you're going to be certified to do certain things, how maybe at times that can be limiting and does not allow for businesses to go even beyond their certifications. And so those are some things that are happening. The other thing that we're working on at Black Onyx Management is we actually have a business survey that's out looking at financial needs and trying to understand, you know, how much money would businesses need if they had access to capital needs? What kind of products would they need? What kind of, how would they like to have their services? What kind of training would they like to have as a part of that product? And so that survey is out in the field. We're seeing, you know, that there's a lot of interest in lines of credit, that the numbers really aren't that much. Anywhere between $25,000 to $50,000 is where most people are. And I think the interesting thing that we're really excited about is when we're thinking about developing a Black-led community development financing institution, we're looking at it as a job creation kind of program. Right now, you've had Black unemployment at double digits for almost a decade, in the last decade. And when you think about Black business formation, we're 26th out of 40 states that have data on this statewide. Indianapolis is, I want to say, like around in the 55th out of 85 in large metros in Black business formation. So we're not looking at that as a challenge, but really more as an opportunity to both increase both the number of businesses we have and the number of employees that we have. If we did a study with Brookings, and we found that if Indianapolis had parity in the number of businesses that we had, and that they hired the same amount of employees as white businesses, that could amount to 169,000 additional jobs and potentially a $52 billion economic impact for this area. And so even if we just get a tenth of that, that is significant and meaningful in a lot of different ways.
I think throughout a lot of these conversations, the key piece that you just brought up, Marshawn, which is the data piece, it often gets overlooked. I think that there is a lot of data out there, but it's either old, it's not current, doesn't have the right voices, it doesn't have a large enough sampling. So I'm really excited that you brought up your survey. And I think that you actually did provide some materials to Emil and team to be able to share that information, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make sure they have it.
Awesome. Well, I would encourage everybody to take part in that survey. As a fellow consultant myself, I'm a little bit of a geek when it comes to survey data. And so, the more the merrier. I think that we can back up everything that we're saying with actual data. I think it allows for additional intentionality in some of the plans and programs that we create. So I know that I'm getting the high sign from our next panel, who's getting ready to launch things, and so I definitely don't want to make them late or have you all wait any longer. I do just want to give an extreme thanks to our panel, Jasmine, Robin, John, and Marshawn, for your excellent feedback and excellent input. I know that people will be, I'm sure, seeking you out individually for additional commentary, and I appreciate everybody's patience as we got kicked off just a few minutes late. But I think that, again, good things come to those who wait, and I think that you all had some excellent things to share this morning. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.